I'm not trying to simplify this too much, but I think the problem that we have is that we want to find these really fancy things to avoid doing the hard thing, which is reconciling with people, restoration of relationships. Hey, this is Eric with True Roots, and we're back with another episode of the Common Man's Torah. This week, we are studying the Torah portion Vayakhel, and that means, and he assembled. You know, if you ever wondered why these Torah portion titles are what they are, it's actually just the first couple words of the portion, whether that's in the middle of a chapter or the beginning of a chapter. So that's where those things come from, if you ever wondered. So this is Exodus chapter 35, verse 1 through 38:20. So essentially Exodus 35 through 38. Now, this portion is kind of a summary of the last, I don't know how many portions that I've done here. This is really the culmination of everything that I've been talking about at a high level. And the purpose of the Common Man's Torah is to approach the Torah from a very practical standpoint. So, you know, you can go down into the very, very deep meanings of a lot of this stuff, and we can mine out some of the deeper stuff. But sometimes we get lost in what everything looks like and going through the very detailed descriptions of the tabernacle and the ark and the table of showbread and all of these things that are described in this portion, and lose sight of the function. So that's kind of what we're going to focus on this week. Hey, I kind of talked about this last year, I believe, and you can find that portion here. That was one of the first ones that I had started doing and then got off track. And but it focuses on something very similar. And I think that if we don't get this, then we turn this into a situation that can be very pharisaical. So we can focus on what things look like versus what their intended function is. So let's talk about this. This week's portion really is a commission. It is bring costly things that were yours and willingly give them to the Lord to create a habitation. That's it. Bring stuff that's costly to you and offer it willingly by your own volition. And that, when it's assembled, when those things are brought together, is going to create a place for the presence of the Creator to be amongst his people. So let's look at this Exodus 35. We're just going to start in verse 1. It says, And Moses gathered all the congregation of the children of Israel together, and said unto them, These are the words which the Lord hath commanded that you should do. And he tells them to observe the Sabbath day. Now, I want to focus on that word, the congregation, because this is something that I've seen pop up in Christian circles. And, you know, personally, I don't like the word games that we play a lot of times. I think that we get into talking about Greek and Hebrew and dissecting things. And I want to, I guess, preface this by saying I've done that and I've studied all of that stuff. And I've come to the conclusion that a lot of it is just kind of fancy doodads that people throw out there to puff themselves up and to make themselves seem smarter than, in a lot of cases, they actually are. That's the way it was for me. And so I want to focus on this word congregation. So Acts 7:38 says, let me back up. Acts 7:37, This is that Moses which said unto the children of Israel, A prophet shall the Lord your God raise up unto you of your brethren, like unto me, him shall ye hear. This is he that was in the church in the wilderness. This was he that was in the church in the wilderness. Now, over the last couple of years, I've seen this thing of this word ecclesia or ecclesia, and it's been thrown out as this new fancy understanding that something bigger than what it actually is. And so I wanted to focus on this because the reality is that the church, whether you use the word church, whether you use the word ecclesia, whether you use the word congregation, whether you use the word kahal, whatever it is, it's all talking about the same thing. It's talking about people. And that's what all of this is about. This is about people. People's lives are really at stake here. Yah cares about people's lives. And I know that seems like really, really fundamental, and I sound like a broken record here, but man, we seem to really, really not get this right in the body of Christ. And we focus on what things look like and the fancy doodads. And it's especially important as we're entering into Passover. And for those of you that are waiting on the Haggadah, I'm still working on it. I've got next week off and I should be able to get that out to you. So stay tuned for that. Reach out to me if you are interested in that still and you haven't. But as we get into all of this stuff, the most important thing to understand about everything that we're talking about with the Torah, or whether it's the Hebraic roots, or whether it's the ecclesia, or whether it's the kahal, or whether it's the Ruach HaKodesh, or whether it's Mitzrayim, or all, whatever you're saying, strip all of this away. Yeshua said the two greatest commandments are love God and love people. Now, the Torah teaches us how to love God, and it teaches us how to love people. But in a lot of cases, we're getting off base, focusing on what things look like versus how they're intended to operate. The purpose of this tabernacle is simply for the presence of God to dwell there. Now, that's our launching point. So in Exodus 35, verse 4, it says, "And Moses spake unto all the congregation of the children of Israel, saying, This is the thing which the Lord commanded, saying, Take from among you an offering unto the Lord, whosoever is of a willing heart. Let him bring it, an offering of the Lord of gold and silver and brass." And he goes on talking about all of these costly things that are going to be assembled into a habitation, a dwelling place of the Lord. Now, that's the focus that I want to talk about here. So let's go ahead to Luke chapter 14, verse 25. It says, And there went great multitudes with him, and he turned and said unto them, If any man come to me and hate not his father and mother and wife and children and brethren and sisters, yea, and his own life also, he cannot be my disciple. And whosoever doth not bear his cross and come after me cannot be my disciple. For which of you, intending to build a tower, sitteth not down first and counteth the cost, whether he have sufficient to finish it? Lest haply, after he hath laid the foundation and is not able to finish it, all that behold it begin to mock him, saying, This man began to build and was not able to finish. Or what king going to make war against another king sitteth not down first, and continueth and consulteth whether he be able with 10,000 to meet him that cometh against him with 20,000? Or else, while the other, yet a great way off, sendeth an ambassage, and desireth conditions of peace. So likewise, whosoever he be of you that forsaketh not all that he hath, he cannot be my disciple. Now, it's important to understand hyperbole. In the scriptures, over and over and over again, hyperbole, which is an extreme example for the purpose of establishing a contrast, this is used in the scriptures to teach us lessons that allow us to apply it to our life. So what are we learning here? Well, everything that I bring to the Lord is costly. It costs me something. And that is the thing that the Lord is well pleased with. If I go ahead to Matthew chapter 10, verse 39, he says, He that findeth his life shall lose it, and he that loseth his life for my sake shall find it. So what, all of these things, if you took them actually literally, you would have people. Now, in some cases here, people do have to separate from family members, but that's not the intent. That's not the desire, that we become abrasive and that we become relationship breakers. That is not the intent of the Creator. And in fact, built into the tabernacle is reconciliation. The whole purpose of the altar of incense, of the altar out in the courtyard, of the mercy seat and the blood and the incense that's offered and the showbread, the purpose of all of that is reconciliation of people who have had broken relationships. So it doesn't make sense logically that the Creator would desire us as our first option to break fellowship. That's not the purpose. The purpose of all of this is to create a contrast to show us that what it is that we bring ought to be with the intent that it goes to God first. So how does that play out? Well, my family's costly. My children, how I raise them. I mean, anybody who has raised children according to the way that the Lord would have us to raise them knows that it's not easy, especially in this day and age where this world wants to pull us in all of these different directions. To walk as a disciple is costly, and that is the thing that the Lord is very pleased with. Now, when we give, this is kind of the cheat code of this existence. Whatever we give to the Lord, actually we get back in its fullness. So if I give my marriage to the Lord, my marriage actually fulfills. It's connected to the source of life, the Creator, and it begins to produce life. If I give my children to the Lord and entrust them to Him, I have actually plugged them into the source of life and blessing that creates everything and life wherever it goes. And now my children, although it may not be easy all the time and it may not be perfect, they are given over to the Lord, and we can trust that He will take care of them so long as we are honoring Him and raising them in the way. We train a child up in the way in which they should go, and when they're old, they will not depart from it. I'm a perfect living example of this. I was no angel by any means, but I came back to the Lord because I had praying parents who taught me when I was young how to walk with God. This is how this works. You see, on the surface, it looks like we're having to give something up. But the reality is, when we give something to God, we actually get it. Just like when Yeshua said, if you seek to save your life, you've already lost it. You'll lose it. But if you lose your life for His sake, that doesn't mean that we should take our own life for His sake. That makes no sense whatsoever. If we give our life to Him, we actually will find the truth and the meaning of our lives. And so, and actually Solomon talks about this in the book of Ecclesiastes, which is my favorite book of all the Bible. And here's a man who had everything. He had everything. And he sought everything. He sought to learn and know and to experience everything, to see where the true meaning of life was. And he landed back on fear God and keep His commandments, for this is the whole end of man. The reality is, when we give something to God, we actually get it in its fullness. So what are we doing then with all of this? Well, we're building a habitation for the Lord, just like they were in the book of Exodus, just like the congregation or the kahal or the church or whatever word you want to use. There wasn't some new thing that was created when we got to the book of Acts. That wasn't anything that was new. That's the assembly. That's the group of people, which was the intended habitation for the Creator. So if I go to Ephesians chapter 2, verse 19, it says, now therefore ye are no more strangers and foreigners, but fellow citizens with the saints and of the household of God, and are built upon the foundation of the apostles and prophets, Jesus Christ himself being the chief cornerstone, in whom all the building, fitly framed together, groweth unto an holy temple in the Lord, in whom ye also are builded together for an habitation of God through the Spirit. This is exactly what they were doing in Exodus chapter 35, 36, 37, and 38, which is this Torah portion. They were fitly framing a habitation for the Lord together. Well, if you've been following along with all of these Torah portions up to now, you know that I've been talking a lot about the house of Israel and the house of Judah. And in Ephesians chapter 2, that's actually what he's talking about, the house of Israel, who had been no longer Israel and now are Israel. And then at the end of that chapter, they're now rebuilding the habitation of the Lord. So when I move ahead to Revelation, the revelation of Jesus Christ, the very end of the book, in chapter 21, verse 12, it says, and it had a great wall. He's talking about the New Jerusalem, had a great wall and high, and had 12 gates, and at the gates 12 angels, and the names written thereon, which are the names of the 12 tribes of the children of Israel. This is all the same consistent stuff. And I hope that this is helping you see that even the scriptures all kind of fits together as a fitly framed story, if you really understand just the main story that I talked about in this Torah portion here, which was last week. All of this stuff, when I get down to verse 22, it says, and I saw no temple therein, for the Lord God Almighty and the Lamb are the temple of it. So there is no temple in the New Jerusalem. So this is the thing. What am I getting at? At the end of the day, what I was talking about at the very beginning of this portion, this is about people. All of this stuff is about people. Jesus said all the law and the prophets hang on these two commandments: love your neighbor, love your God, love your neighbor. And you can't love God unless you love your neighbor, because you can't love your God, the scriptures tell us, that you don't see, if you can't love your neighbor that you do see. See, all this stuff works together. It all goes together. Brethren, this is about people. And this is what I was talking about in the Yom Kippur portion that I had done here. We're talking about Yom Kippur, that, again, I'm not trying to simplify this too much, but I think the problem that we have is that we want to find these really fancy things to avoid doing the hard thing, which is reconciling with people, restoration of relationships. And that's really what's going on, because the presence of the Lord is going to dwell in peace. Jesus said that every man will know us by the love that we have for each other. So, hey, I'm Brother Eric with True Roots Ministries. I hope this has been a blessing to you. And we are closing out next week the book of Exodus, and we are moving right into one of my favorite books, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, which is quite a wild ride. Come on back. We'll wrap up the book of Exodus next week, and I hope to see you again. All right. Bye, everyone.